Welcome back to Speaking of Meaning, Better Communication, Greater Impact. I am Ibrahim, and today I'm joined by Kasim Hussain, a talented leader, and he is a director working in IT and IT transformations. Welcome, Kasim.
Thanks a lot, Ibrahim.
I know you personally, and for the listeners who don't know who you are, can you tell us about your background and what it is that you do as well?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned already, my name is Kasim. I'm currently working in Deloitte in an internal IT department where I'm leading two teams. The first team is IT transformation, and the second one is IT projects, right? So basically, me and my team are responsible for making sure that we transition our local Nordic IT in the different Nordic countries to become one Nordic IT department, right? And otherwise, I have, background-wise, I have worked in startup in my early career. Then I have also been a consultant working in a company called PA and also been in McKinsey. And now this time around at Deloitte, it's actually my second round. So I have been in Deloitte before where I had multiple roles, but the last one was actually head of strategy execution.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so have you always been interested in leadership and communication as well?
Yeah, actually I have. I think while I was in the startup, right? You probably know when you're in a startup, you have a lot of hats on. And I think one of the hats that I had on was actually HR as well, right? So I was part of hiring a lot of people, making a lot of mistakes, I will say, along the way also. So I think that made me curious about leadership, right? How do you actually get leadership correct in the right way? And by that saying that, how do you get people to follow you, right? In those sense. So I think, yeah, of course, that has always been my focus. And when it comes to communication, I think that's just a curiosity of how can you actually be more effective in the way that you communicate to make sure that what you intended is also what is perceived. So I think both of the things have been something that I have been focusing on in my early career, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so right now you are responsible for the Nordic countries. That's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. And there's a lot of cultural differences, right? Which also means that you as a leader need to be mindful of what you say, how you say it, right? Because it has an impact. And I think we have a tendency to think that we are very similar in the Nordic countries. Of course, there are things that we are very similar around, but there is also differences, right? And it's not easily to spot it if you are not being mindful of it.
That's true. That's absolutely true. I used to live in Norway for a while, and just how you communicate and the culture is totally different than the culture and how we communicate in Sweden.
Yeah.
So I can imagine. Between Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and other countries, there is some cultural differences as well.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And I think the best way actually to address is to be transparent about it, right? So if we are not being transparent about it, then it's very difficult to do anything about it. I think we should be able to create an environment where we actually encourage people to speak up and be okay with sharing how we are different and what people are saying actually having an impact. Sometimes it's a negative impact and sometimes it's a positive impact, right?
And our goal should be to have a positive impact, of course. I remember one time when you told me, Kasim, that communication is important, it's difficult, and sometimes we take it for granted. What do you mean by that? We take it for granted.
I think, and that's what I mean about that is actually it's an activity, right? So it's an activity that we do every single day, right? Being at workplace, being at home, being with our loved ones, family, whatever. So it's it almost feels like it's a muscle memory, right? That you, if somebody asks you something, you just immediately respond without thinking about what is it that you are saying sometimes. I compare it a little bit to like sometimes when you're driving your car, you go from A to B, and then you were like, okay, how did I actually come from A to B, right? And sometimes it's like the same thing when it comes to communication, right? So we do it so frequently, and we just basically don't stop and think and reflect on, so what we are saying, are we saying in the right way? Are we saying it in a way that is not judgmental, for example, and things like that, right? So, and if we compare it to in a work setting, right? So we do communication in different ways, right? So we have presentations, we have meetings, we are writing emails, and even when we are chatting with someone in the canteen, we are having a conversation, right? But I also think that maybe a lot can recognize that you have been in a meeting or you have read an email where you were actually left with more questions than answers, right? Because the message was so unclear. And what actually that leads to is that we have multiple iterations because we need to understand, right? And there's frustration in the process and then misunderstandings, right? So when you have the misunderstandings, that is very difficult to go back and fix that. It takes a long time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And I think for that alone is important to be mindful of your communication skills, right? Because I think skills, as I mentioned, communication, we take it for granted, but communication is a skill. And as if with every skill is something that you have to learn, and then it's something that you have to continuously nurture, right?
There's a lot to unpack here. I totally agree with you. I think when it comes to misunderstandings, once people have misunderstood each other, it takes a lot of courage, a lot of time to go back and talk about things and fix things and just understand each other. And so being mindful of how you communicate is very important. I mean, looking back in my own life, where I have struggled is usually when I have been perhaps too emotional. Let's say when I'm giving feedback and there's so much to do, and you're stressed out, perhaps you're emotional, you need to stay on track, and so you give feedback, and then it lands in the wrong way, and the other person now misunderstands the reason why you're giving feedback.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's easy to be mindful of that when you are relaxed, when you are trying to be rational. But when you are perhaps stressed out or you're emotional or when things are going wrong, that is the most difficult, but perhaps that is the most important time to be mindful at the same time.
Totally agree. I think totally agree. I think, and I think you're spot on in terms of being emotionally invested in stuff is not always a good starting point to communicate in an effective way, right? Because then you are already looking at things from a very specific angle, which is yourself. So you're focusing on yourself and you're forgetting the audience, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's important to be mindful of what is it that you're trying to achieve when you're communicating, right? And I think we tend to think about our personal goals, but there are also an audience that are sitting there and listening to you, and they need to get something out of it as well, right? So we need to be somehow put our emotions aside and think logically about communication.
Yes. And so what I've learned is timing is vital. So if you are, as you say, emotionally invested, then perhaps take a step back. Don't send that email. Today is
Yes.
Friday, send it on Monday. Don't call that person when you are too emotionally invested, angry, emotional. Wait. Let the heat cool down before you take action.
Yeah, definitely. But sometimes you don't even recognize that it's not a good time to send the email,
Yeah.
right?
Because
And
it's an autopilot.
exactly, is an autopilot. I think all of us would probably have like to have a clean sheet with saying that now we're going on a weekend, we need to get everything out there, right? We don't want to wait until Monday. And I think you that's where it becomes a challenge, right? So how do you recognize your own bias, right? And one of the things that you can do is actually to have a very healthy feedback culture in your organization. Because if you are communicating in the way that you have used to do for a long time, and people don't tell you anything about the impact or the lack of impact you are having with the words that you are saying, then it's difficult to do anything about it. That's why having a very healthy feedback culture is important. And then you mention giving feedback, and then you give the feedback, and people don't, get the feedback as you intended. We need to have some guidelines on how we give feedback. And the guidelines should be agreed from both sides, the one that is giving the feedback and the one that is receiving the feedback, right? Because if you are not doing that, then we have a tendency to focus on the negative things all the time. Every time we give feedback, we are focusing on what went wrong. But I think it's even more important to give feedback when things go right, right? Because when things goes right and you give feedback and you agree on the condition of the feedback, then you will have a team member that is fully motivated, right? But if you keep giving feedback when your team member are doing something wrong, then I will guarantee you will have a team member that is demotivated, right?
Yeah. So basically, create a culture where you give feedback and you agree upon how to give feedback, how to receive feedback, but also give feedback even when somebody's doing something right. Because usually I'm used to people giving me feedback when I look back at when I used to work in the corporate world. We gave each other feedback every time something went wrong, and almost never when something went right.
Yeah. And that's not a healthy feedback culture, right? Because then you almost have like people having opportunistic behavior, right? They will always give you feedback I'll not say look down on you, but they will just give it, you're not there for the team spirit. You're not there for uplifting people, right? Because it has a totally different impact. I'm not saying that you should not give feedback if people are not doing something that they should do, right? But we need to give constructive feedback. That's what we talked about. Been talking about for centuries. I was about to say, but it's important to give constructive feedback. But what we tend to do is, because we are operating a very fast-paced environment, that we give feedback and then we're only focusing on what are the challenges.
We focus only on the negative things.
Yeah.
But I like that feedback culture where we all agree how we should give feedback and how we should take the feedback we get.
Yeah.
And if we agree on that, then this is our deal.
Yeah, exactly. I think what it allows is to make it more comfortable to give feedback, right? Because one thing is to receive feedback, another thing is to give feedback. And I think both of it can be very challenging, right? It's not that we feel encouraged to give. When have you give feedback to your leader, for example, right? Immediate leader, when have you give feedback? I don't think a lot of people actually do so, because it's hard. It's hard to do so.
Yeah, it's hard. And sometimes maybe the leader is not inviting others. So let's say I give you feedback today and you react with anger, with fear, with bitterness, then I'm going to be cautious to give you feedback because you are my leader or my colleague, for instance.
Definitely. And I think that is where it helps to have clear guidelines. have a clear structure of how do we give feedback. This is the framework we use for giving feedback. To know exactly what to expect, right? And I think that's even the playing field, right? And it also makes sure that the ones that are not good in giving feedback now have a way of giving good feedback.
So, Kasim, we've talked about guidelines, creating a culture where we all agree on how we should give each other feedback. And I think that we can have the guidelines, we can have the culture, but if I'm not comfortable giving feedback, then I'm not going to create the change I would like to see. So, my question to you is, how can we have courage to give feedback?
So creating a psychological safety in your team is important. And basically that's about making sure that you include all, right? You create the space so people feel that they are heard and they can contribute without being judged, right? And that's what's important for you as a leader.
So for people to feel that I feel safe here in this environment.
Yes.
This is crucial. This is crucial.
Exactly. And I think also another point is actually we when it comes to conflicts, for example, right? We tend to think that conflicts are bad, but conflicts can be really good, right? So how conflicts can be good if you are having healthy conflicts in your team, and that is where people can have different opinions, again, without being judged. And people feel that they can come up with different opinions because you create the space for them to do so. And one more thing where you actually, the talents, the team members can challenge the leader, right? Without the leader taking it personally. Because in the end of the day, we are here to create the most value as possible as a team. And I think we should encourage people to be opinionated about things. And then we should create, again, the space for them to do so without us judging. And you should, as a leader, call out if people are starting to get personal, right? Because then you are also recognizing that now they are actually, we are not now having a healthy conflict here. What we are having now is a personal conflict. And that's the difference, right? So we want to move away from having personal conflict to have healthy conflicts.
Healthy conflict where we discuss the issues, how to move forward. And once we agree on which path to take, everybody is on board.
Yeah, exactly. And it could also be that you are not on board with the decision. You still feel that the decision that is being made is not the right one. But when we leave the room, we are all in the same ship. Right?
Yes, and we are more likely to do so if we feel respected, valued, heard, or like you say it, the psychological safety.
Yeah.
This is great advice, Kasim. So you told me one time that a leader has two responsibilities. Number one is motivating the team, and number two is leading upwards. Now, how do you as a leader handle the different ways to communicate? Number one, with your teams, where you have to motivate them, and number two, with senior leadership to lead upwards.
Of course, you have more responsibility as a leader, but one is, of course, to make sure that you are able to motivate your team, right? You're able to motivate your team, set clear directions, and making sure that everybody actually understand what is expected of them, right? The second thing is that we as leaders should also be able to communicate upwards. And what do I mean about that? I mean about building trust with senior stakeholders, right?
Oh, yeah.
So and the senior stakeholders, they feel that you and your team are able to deliver on the goals. right? They trust you, basically, right? And when it comes to the first one, where how can you do that? How can you motivate your team, and how can you make sure that the way that you communicate is something that um, bring the team closer, so to speak, and don't divide the team, right? And I think I already mentioned one of them, which is this psychological safety, right? That is one thing, because I will see that is a fundamental thing, right? That you need to have that fundamental thing in place, and it takes time. And you cannot just expect from one day to another that you have to create a psychological safety. That's not how it works. But then there's other things that you as a leader, that you are able to convey your message in a way that is well understood, right? And it sounds easy. Yes, I'm saying, yes, you should do A and B. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, sometimes we need to give more transparency of why are we going from A to B, right? Why is this important? What would it mean for you, for me, for the team? So people get that understanding, right? Sometimes we need to connect the dots. And that is where it's really important that you as a leader are able to communicate that in a very effective way.
It seems like we always go back to trust and communication.
Yeah, and I think now we have talked a lot about verbal communication, right? It's not only about the words that you put out. It's also about what are you doing in the meeting, for example. How are you sitting? How are you listening, right? And one thing is active listening. So as a leader, that is a crucial skill that you need to learn. You need to learn to listen, and listen a little bit more, and listen again, right? Because what we have a tendency to think that as a leader should come up with all the answers to the questions, and that's not correct. What we need to do is to make sure that we as a whole come up with the best solution to things. And one way to do so is to listen, and listen to the words that have been said, and then challenge those things.
So active listening, is that, in your opinion, is the difference between what separates great leaders from average leaders?
Oh, that's a big question. I think definitely that is something that I feel is lacking. When I now have been in a lot of different settings, and I feel like the active listening is something that is missing, because what I recognize when you are in a meeting, then let's just see, I'm sitting there with senior stakeholders, and then I'm trying to say something. I can immediately see if a senior stakeholder is, or it could be a team member, whatever. But if somebody is actually already thinking about what they should say, and not listening to what I'm saying, right? And I think that's usually what happens, that we are so much focusing on our own answers, on our own narrative, and that we forget that we should also listen.
And not just listen, but actively listen, really take in what the other person is feeling. Because for me, this is what empathy is all about. Empathy is not about agreeing with the person, but more understanding where they're coming from. And if I'm going to understand where you're coming from, I have to make you feel that I have listened, and you feel that you're also being seen, valued, and heard. Again, psychological safety, I guess.
Yes, I agree on that. I think another thing, I think a lot of the big organizations have now understood the value of diversity, right? So we have, if you go to a big organization, you will see a lot of people with different nationalities, culture, background, all these kind of things. But I think there's one thing we forget: diversity is not enough if you are not creating an inclusive environment, right? So it's okay to put in reports that we have so many females, males, people with this educational background, but are we creating equal opportunities for all? Right? So if you look at the senior leadership, do you recognize yourself in when you're having meeting with the senior leadership? Do you feel that you're being represented in that forum? And I think that is where we are still missing things. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because if we don't balance that as well, I think we will have a challenge in creating this inclusive and psychological safety environment, right? Because then you are not paying attention.
So are you saying we should invest in diversity and have diverse workplaces in order for people to feel seen, heard, and valued?
I think we should. I think companies are already recognizing that diversity is a value, right? Is something that we should focus on because it gives different perspective on problem solving. It gives different perspective on culture and etc. etc. I think we need to take it further to focus on how the inclusion part, right? And in order to understand the inclusion part, we also need to understand the culture, the diversity we have in our organization, right? So what does it mean when I say this and I have a person that is from, I don't know, Norway, India, or it could be a lot of different places? Because I think, for example, people say that Danes are very direct, right? And if you are very direct, and for example, in other cultures where you are not being that direct, then it can have a huge impact, right, on the one that is that you are having this directness with, right? So I think we need to focus on how do we create more inclusive environments in our organization.
Okay, diversity is so broad, Kasim.
Yeah.
Do you think we need to hire more people from different backgrounds and so forth in order for companies to achieve their full potential? Or do you see a lack of diversity in leadership?
That's a good question. I think we have a tendency when we talk about diversity to focus on male and female because that is something that we can measure, right? We can say we have so many percentage of female and so many percentage of males. For me, that diversity is much more. It's much more. And if we want to get the full potential of diversity, we need to look at it from a broader perspective. Right? We need to look at from people with the different educational backgrounds. We need to look at from people with different cultural backgrounds, nationalities, and all these things. Because I think that is where you are utilizing the full spectrum of diversity, right? And I think you really need to your organization basically should represent the society you live in. Because we are very diverse in the society, right? So I think it's important that our organization, to some extent, also represent that.
Yes. And do you think that it should be people should be hired based on their qualifications? Or are we talking about hiring for optics in order to create that image that we have achieved diversity?
I'm not. I see what you were saying. I'm always that we should, of course, hire people for their skills. I think definitely we should do that. I'm not a big fan of quotas, right? But at the same time, it is also very difficult to encourage organizations to do so if they are not used to do it. And sometimes quotas is the easiest way, because then it's very tangible, right? We are hiring a female or male or this person with this background, etc. But I'm actually not that. I'm more fan of we hire people based on their qualifications. And to be honest, I think it is possible to hire people based on their qualifications, representing different diverse, capabilities, for example. So I don't think it's such an issue.
No.
You just
Yes.
need to broaden your horizon, right? And see, okay, there are other possibilities in just male and female.
Broaden your perspective, and also when you hire, I think there's a tendency to hire people who reminds us of who we are.
Yes.
We hire people who are like us.
Yeah.
And this is not because you're a bad person or an evil person. It's just how human nature really is. And so we need to be aware of that and create that awareness in our organization.
Yeah, true. Because it feels more safe, right? It feels more safe to hire someone that you look like or that you think alike. But I think it's the easy way out.
It is.
And it might be helpful for you in the short term, but in the long term, I think if you don't get diversity inclusion right, it could be a challenge for your organization, basically.
So basically what we are talking about here is, and this is also what I think, is to create a level playing field for everybody. Irrespective of your background, culture, if you're male, female, and so forth, creating a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, an inclusive environment for everyone. And I think we should get to a state where we don't think about it. We just do it. We just do it because it's just so natural now that it's not something that we have to think about all the time. And I think we are not there yet. And I think it will take some time to get there. But having conversation, or how many people should we hire from this education background or from this, nationality and all these kind of things. I think we should get to a place where we just hire based on skills, but at the same time, it ensures that we have a diverse workflows, and we as an organization are creating an inclusive environment where all people feel that they can be the best version of themselves, right? And thrive.
If we talk about communication and how complicated and difficult and how hard it can be sometimes, we live in a fast-paced world, a lot of emotions. Sometimes we're afraid to give feedback. Sometimes there are conflicts. What do you think is the biggest barrier in the workplace in this age?
I think it's hard to point on one single thing, but especially in Denmark, for example, we don't have this early training in how to communicate in an effective way. So in my school time, for example, I was not taught how to communicate effectively, right? It's usually a skill that we build and refine through our careers, right? So I think that's, of course, one of the things. And as it is with everything, that if it becomes a habit, it's very difficult to change a habit, because you have to unlearn a lot of things, right? In order to get it right. So it's more safe just to do what you are used to do, right? And then, of course, at the same time, you mentioned already that we are operating in a very fast-paced environment, especially as leaders, that we are jumping from one meeting to another, that is very easy to go into autopilot, right? just do the stuff that we are used to do, communicate in the same way that we are used to do, and sometimes it feels like we don't have the time to stop, reflect, and put real thought into how we are saying things, right? So I think there's different elements to it, and I think one of the other things that we also talked a little bit about is our own bias, right? So our own bias in terms of if we don't have, for example, a healthy feedback culture, then you are just communicating in the way that you are, and people are not telling you the impact or the lack of impact that you're having with your words. Then it's very difficult to know that you need to do something else. And I think probably why people don't want to say anything to you is that you are not inviting them to give you that feedback as well, right? So I think there's a lot of different layers into that. And then we talked about diversity, which again plays a very huge part in this, right? That we have cultural and language differences, right? So and that also creates a barrier. So if you're like my native language is not English, right? And for me it can also be very hard sometimes to explain things as I would do in Danish, right? And then it can sometimes comes across as being very impatient or very direct, even more direct when I'm speaking in Danish, right? So I think those are the things that we need to be mindful of. And then, the emotions, we also talked about that. Emotions, we bring our emotions into meetings, into our emails, and that is something that make us lose our objectivity, I would say so.
So how do we not involve emotions when we communicate, when we make an important decision, when we go into that meeting? Because to me, that sounds difficult to do sometimes.
Yeah, and that's why you need support. If you feel it's difficult, you should have an alliance at your workplace. Somebody you trust, somebody that you can say, hey, I have this email. Can you please read it? And what do you think? What is the feeling you get when you read this? And then you get the immediate response of that, right? And then you can adjust it along the way. And we have today we have other tools like AI tools. You can put it in and say, I want to make sure that I'm communicating this in this way. What do you think, right? And sometimes it's good to just get that feeling, right? Am I heading in the right direction or not, right? And that's more like with the email, right? And I think when you are, for example, in a meeting, I think then it's very important to pay attention, not to only what is being said, also to what is not being said. So how are people reacting when you are saying something, right? What is their body language? Are they sitting like this? Or are they not? Are they engaged? Are they looking at the computer now and start typing? So I think you need to pay attention to that, because if you're seeing, because you can end up being even more frustrated in the meeting because you're already bringing your emotion into the meeting, and then you're seeing people are not engaged, and then that could create even more irritation and frustrations, right? So you need to be able to scan and adapt within the environment. And it's difficult. It's very, very difficult to do so.
Yeah, that's well said. I think like you say, Kasim, you have to have the ability to be able to read a room. And so that means that you can't be up in your head. You have to be present in order to be able to read the room and also be flexible and adapt. Especially if you are giving a presentation, for instance, and you are on the stage, if you're too nervous, if you are too much focused on what you're saying, how you look like, if they will like you or not, you're not present. And you're not going to see those facial expressions, the body language, if people are tired or not.
Yeah.
And so basically presence and being able to read a room and be comfortable with who you are as a leader.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the key thing is what you said lastly was that being yourself, right? We need to be ourselves. And I think now I've been working as a consultant as well, right? Where I saw a tendency of people actually not being themselves. So they are trying to be somebody else. So when you went into the meeting, you can immediately see, okay, like, why is he now acting like this? Right? Because I know him like this. So I think it's important, and especially in consultancy, it's a people's game, right? And people are really good in reading each other. So you need to be yourself. And if you are not being yourself, then it's easy to spot. I would say so.
I agree with you. It is easy to spot. It's definitely not attractive,
Mm.
and it's definitely not going to help you at all. I think this problem is common because we often hear you should fake it until you make it. And I've made a video about it. I don't think you should fake anything. I think instead, I don't remember who it was who said it, but you should do it until you become it. You
Ah,
shouldn't fake your emotions. You shouldn't fake anything, because I have more respect for you and for somebody who says, hey, I'm actually a little bit nervous. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to figure it out, than somebody who is pretending to be comfortable, who is pretending to know something they don't know, or to be somebody they're not. I think don't fake anything. Instead, just be yourself. If you're afraid, say you're afraid. If you're nervous, say you're nervous. Because emotions are contagious,
mm, yes.
and we can feel it when somebody is not being genuine.
Mm,
And so my advice is always be yourself. Great advice. Great advice here, Kasim.
yeah.
Kasim, you told me one time that when you prepare for instance, a meeting, a conversation, when you're preparing a communications plan and so forth, always have a plan B.
Mm.
Can you tell me why, and also share with us a time you had a plan B that you had to use or implement?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think usually the plan B goes for the longer meetings, work meetings. It could be workshops and stuff like that, right? And what I mean about having a plan B is to be flexible, right? To be flexible, to adapt to the environment that you are in. And and I think let me give you an example when it comes to workshop, for example, right? So I have done a lot of workshops, and in the beginning I was so strict with my agenda. I put it in, and there's even not time to breathe in between the different things that needs to be solved for, and the exercise, and etc. But then I realized that I was not getting um, what I wanted out of the workshops, right? So I was sometimes even more confused. And what actually happens, what the audience feel the same thing. And sometimes it can lead to people feeling I'm wasting my time in a full day workshop. So I started to, change my strategy, so to speak. That doesn't mean I didn't prepare. I still prepared, let's say that I have a full day workshop. I know the agenda points, what needs to be in there, what is the exercise. I really think about what is the minimum thing that I need to get out of this workshop, right? So I structure it in a way that I put that first in the agenda. So I want to make sure we get through that. Then maybe 1/3 of the day is where I allow for flexibility. It doesn't mean that I haven't points in the agenda. It means that those points are flexible. I can adjust it. So what I usually do is that when the conversation moves, right, and I can see that you think you have thought about everything, but you have not. right? Because in the workshop, you realize things that are important. And then you need to figure out, okay, this is important. I haven't, thought about this, but I want to include it to have really good conversations. And the output is really going to be really good, right? So what I do is usually have a long break, lunch break. And then based on the first conversations, I actually adapt the agenda towards that, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that I have a plan B in mind, what needs to be done. Sometimes I do, but my plan B is to adjust the agenda if it's needed. So, and I think that's really important because what you're doing here is recognizing what is being said in the moment, right? And you are actually active listening to what is being said. And then you take that and then you utilize it in the room. And sometimes I'm being very transparent, saying, hey, guys, we have realized something here that we didn't think about. And this is really, really important. For that reason, I have adjusted the agenda to this. Do you agree? And then people say, yes, of course. Right? And people are happy and they're even more engaged because you have listened. And now they feel, okay, we are getting somewhere. Right? So I think that's one of the way of thinking about having a plan B, right?
So sounds like it's a prerequisite to be flexible, to be comfortable, to be able to read the room, and also have knowledge about what it is you're doing. Because if I remember my own experience, when I started 15, 16 years ago, giving workshops and speeches, because I wasn't comfortable, I was more rigid. But the more I did it, the more knowledge I acquired, I was able to be more flexible and adapt along the way. And I can also imagine that how you communicate that change to the group, because now you have identified moving forward, this is what we need, and we're going to change the agenda, and then you communicate it in a way that they actually accept it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the acceptance here is important, right? Because if you let's just say that you read the room incorrectly and then you change the agenda and then you just don't, get the acceptance, then you are doing it even worse, right? Then you are adapting your agenda to something that is not correct because you didn't read the room in a correct way, which will mean that people will be more frustrated and unengaged. But what you're allowing is that when you're asking for acceptance, is that if people don't agree, they will say it, and that's totally fine, because we are here together as a cohesive team that we want to, get the best out of this workshop. That's why we are gathered today, right? So I think that's important one.
We've been sitting for a while, and I know our time is running out. So I want to ask you a few more questions, Kasim. This is about framework and tools. You mentioned one time when I was talking to you about a framework called SCQA, the Minto Principle. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, I can. I can do so. So the SCQA, as you mentioned, is a well-known framework, usually used by consultants. So the S stands for situation, the C stands for complication, and the Q stands for question, and the A stands for answer. So it's actually built on something called the Minto Principle, which is created by Barbara Minto, which is a former McKinsey consultant. She was so good in communication that she actually read a book about it. So basically, the mentor principle is the overarching concept of how you can structure your argument in a very top-down way, right? So basically starting with the answer. While the SCQA is a framework that is specifically used to, how can you say, graph fitting the introduction of a presentation, for example, or a meeting or something like that before you actually get to the answer itself, right? So, and you can use it for reports, meetings, presentations, emails, etc. And we can try to go through the framework, right? So if we start with the S, so S is the situation, as I mentioned, right? So
Situation.
exactly. So situation, basically telling something that the receiver already knows and accept to be true. And why is that important? Because that is the introduction that we are giving, right? So if we are not getting people on board immediately, then we have lost it. So we want to tell something that all people that are sitting in the room can say yes to. And typically is a fact-based statement, right? Where are we now? Where do we want to go? Something like that. Then we have the complication. So the complication is something that is a challenge with the current situation. So it could be something that is stopping us from getting from A to B, for example, right? So it's actually, that's the problem, so to speak. So you have communicated the situation, you have communicated the complication, then you have the question, right? And the question is typically implied because that is something that people will sit with. Okay, you have stated the situation, the complication. So what now, right? How can we fix this? This is where you get to the answer, right? So the answer is typically a simple sentence that sums up your presentation, your findings, your conclusion or recommendations. You also call it the governing thought, right? Then, of course, your answer or your governing thought is supported by, other key arguments, right? And typically, if you look at it from a report point of view, you will have a section, different sections that together sum up the recommendation. I don't know if this seems very like conceptual or something like that at the moment, but maybe let me give you an example, if that's okay.
Let's do that. The answer is the A, right?
Yes, the answer
Okay,
is
so
the A.
okay, so we have the S is the situation, the C is the complication, the Q is the question, and the A is the answer.
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right. Yeah, go ahead. Give us an example.
Yeah, so let me just think it through. So let's just say we have a company, right? So so the situation could be something like that. Until recently, we had a strong position and a high market share in a very profitable market, for example, right? So the complication is that we are surprised that our competitor has taken XX% of the market share in this very profitable market. Then you will sit back with, okay, what has caused this shift, right? And then the answer could be something like our loss of market share is caused by problems with our actual and perceived quality of the products that we deliver. I know that's just to give you an idea, right? And then what will happen is that you have subsections that go through that backs up your answer, right? So it could be that you have experienced major increase in quality issues, right? That has been reported from customers, right? It could also be that when they contact you, you give a very poor service, for example, right? And then also that it could be that the competitors have done a lot of marketing campaigns, right, to get market share. So your answer is usually backed up with much more data. But what this help is, the framework, is it allows you to tell a story, basically, right?
Tell a story, yeah?
You tell a story in a very simple way that is something that people can follow. So let's just say if I give an answer and I immediately start to say, yeah, so we have a lot of problem with product A and we have a lot of problem with product B, and then we have also seen there are some campaigns going on from our competitor A. Then you have lost people because it's very difficult to conceptualize it in a way, right? And also to understand it because you are all over the place. So you need to make it simple for the reader, for the audience to comprehend what is it that is being said. That's why we use typically this way of telling a story. And it might seem very, very simple, but it's very hard to master. Very hard to master.
Why do you think it's hard to master? Because at least to me, it does make sense to start with, the situation, to tell about the complication, to ask a question, and then together to come up with the answer. Why do you think a lot of leaders don't use this principle or framework?
I think first thing it goes probably back to the fast-paced environment, right? So it takes time. We've talked about like communication is a skill. You need to learn it, then you need to nurture it, right? It goes in with this, right? So it is a simple framework, but it takes time to really to master it because you really need to sit down. You need to think about, okay, the situation that I'm going to write here does that actually make sense and resonate with the audience that I'm trying to communicate with, and the challenge and all these kind of things, right? So I think this complicates it, right? And if you haven't been taught with this kind of framework, then it's very difficult to get it right. And like, because you just go into autopilot and do what you are used to do, right? And another thing is that when we are analyzing anything, or we are working with a specific subject, we have a lot of details, right? And we want to put in all the details to make sure that that people can see we have looked at things in a very holistic way, and people know that they get all the details, so they know that we have thought about everything, like as I explained, the holistic way. But usually, for example, when you're communicating with senior stakeholders, they don't like to get a lot of details, right? Because first of all, they are not SMEs, so they will not know anyway. But what they will recognize is that if you're telling a story that makes sense in a logical way, right? And if it makes sense in a logical way, then they trust you. And if they trust you, then they also trust that you can deliver the work that needs to be delivered. So another thing is that I think it's not sufficient enough to be an expert in your field, right? You must be able to get your message across with impact. And usually where that happens is that if you have an SME that is very detail oriented in a specific field, let's just say like, I don't know, cybersecurity or infrastructure, it could be different things, then they have the tendency to focus on, again, a lot of details, right? And if you're communicating to people that don't have a knowledge in that area, then you have lost them. Right? So that's where you can use these kind of frameworks to make sure you think about what is it that you're putting down. And I think before you actually start on using the framework, there's of course other things that you need to have in mind, right? Who is the audience? Who are you communicating to? What will they be looking at? What is important for them, right? And all these things. And when you have that right, then of course, then you can start to use the framework and create your storyline, so to speak.
And this is also true in public speaking. You have to know your audience.
Yeah.
And then from your audience, you craft your message. And then even there, it's not enough just to have a message. You have to be able to emotionally connect with them. And when I listen to you, Kasim, and I listen to the framework, and you say you need to be able to hold their attention and make them interested, it sounds like storytelling, like you're saying, emotionally connecting with the audience in order for them to not only trust you, but also accept your logic, accept your message, or buy into it.
Yes, yes, and it is a very powerful. If you get it right, it's very powerful, right? And you want to make sure that people listen to you when you are having a presentation, right? And that is basically a good way when you structure your conversation with the SCQA framework. It helps you to do so. And then again, it's also when you are well prepared, right? Is this with everything? Then the anxiety that you might have going into the room, actually, gets lowered because you know exactly what is it that you are trying to say. You have the logic, right? And that helps you.
Definitely. So use the framework SCQA. S is situation, C is complication, Q is question, and A is the answer.
Yes.
Great job. So we're almost going to wrap up, but I have a few questions for you. One is, if you are at work and you want to be a more effective communicator or a more effective leader, what small habit can our listeners start practicing starting today?
I think that's a good question. I think like before you actually start to speak, you need to think about communication, right? And like the one thing is the SCQA, but I think there's another thing that you can use as well, which is that if you think about communication in 3 phases. So the first one is actually the preparation, where you set yourself up for success. Then you have the second one, which is actually during the conversation, where you observe and adapt. And then the last thing is the reflection part, right? Where you learn and improve. So if we go to the first one, which is the preparation, right? I think we have talked about some of the things, but is to take the time that is needed before a meeting or conversation and reflect on who is it that I'm going to talk with? Who is the audience? For example, if your audience is CFOs, then you probably need to get your numbers right? Because that will be something that they will be looking for. So, and why are we actually having this conversation in the first place? What is it? What will a win look like for me and for the audience as well, right? So having all these things in your mind, so you're setting yourself up for success. I think that's the first thing, the preparation that goes into it, and I see that as the fundamentals that you need to be in place. Then we also talk about like during the conversation, right? So the ability to observe and adapt. I think I mentioned, active listening, listen again, and listen a little bit more. That is important because we want to look at what is it people are saying, why are they saying the things they are. So go behind the words, so to speak, right? And that will allow us to have great conversations. So, and I think one thing is that it's actually rarely that the best conversations that you are having is actually the ones that go after your plan, right? Because so much happened during a meeting that you need to have that kind of flexibility to adjust, basically, right? And then I think the last one is something that I think a lot of people forget, is the reflection part. So that is actually where you talk about where you think about learn and improve. So, and we think about like reflection should be something that take half an hour, 1 hour. No. It can be 2, 3, 4 minutes, right? It's top of your head. Write down, what do you think went well? What do you think you should change for the next time? I think if you just get that right, you're in a really good position. Then we talked about feedback, right? This is also an area where you can get feedback. So you can tell a colleague, hey, I'm going into this presentation with you. Can you please be can you please pay attention to my body language? Or can you pay attention to when I'm communicating the numbers? Are they am I making my point clear or something like that? But what is important is that you are being very, clear on what is it that they should give you feedback on. So not just going and say, hey, can you give me feedback on how it went with the presentation? They will talk about a lot of different things. But if you narrow it down to, hey, body language, the way I convey the numbers, then you're being very, very specific. And I think that's also helpful. So I think these three phases, if you have that in your mind, that could also make a lot of improvement.
Well, I like this simple advice because it's not rocket science. It's just that we have to be mindful and we have to think about this and we have to put the time needed to work on communication. So preparation, it takes work. You have to remember it. You have to do it. Doing the conversation, be flexible. Like you say, listen between what is being said, read between the lines, being present, being flexible, and then the reflection, feedback, and think about how you can develop and how the meeting went or how the discussion went or how the speech went. It's not rocket science. It's just that we have to force ourselves to basically do these things if we want to take our communication skills to the next level.
True. And it's with everything that you learn, it takes time, as you mentioned, right? It takes time and is a habit. How can we make it a habit so we don't even think about it? We just do it, right? It can be when you're driving a car, right? You just, if you're going to a meeting, you have sometimes what I do is while going at the work, and if I have a meeting like in the morning and I haven't had full time to prepare, then I just think about like SCQA. So what is important here in the situation, complication and things like that, that just give you a good start, right? And then a lot of things happen in the conversation, and then you show that flexibility, and then you will manage it. So, but if you start up with a good one, then the chances of ending up with having a successful conversation is high.
I love it. Make it a habit. In the beginning, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be, it's going to feel like you have to have discipline. But after a while, it's going to become a habit. That's what I love. Great.
Yeah.
So, so you are obviously a talented leader. A lot of people look up to you, Kasim, and I've seen you also in action. What advice do you have to young professionals who would like to develop their leadership skills?
We talked about being yourself, right? And I think I want to take it a step further, is talk about what kind of leader do you would like to be? How do you want people to look at you as a leader? That is very important, right? And you need to get that right, because then you know also what is it that you're solving for. Then another thing is that when you get that right, then get some inspiration. Get some inspiration. It could be inspiration from a mentor that you look up to, right? And that can give you the guides, can provide guidelines, not guidelines, but can guide you in the way that you want, right? And I think a mentor is a really good thing to have. Now we are talking about like leadership. It could also be in different areas, but having a mentor is really impactful if you have the right collaboration as a mentee and mentor. So I would say first, need to understand what kind of leader do you want to be, and I think then don't force it, right? Because leadership should also be natural, and all people are not born to be leaders. You can learn some skills to be better leader, But sometimes I also know people that say, I don't want to be a leader. Too much responsibility. And it's not something that motivates me. So you also need to fully understand, is it actually something that you would like to do? Because it comes with a huge responsibilities. So I think there's a lot of nuances to this, right?
What is the one thing that you feel is the most important thing that we haven't talked about today?
That's a good question. I think we have talked about a lot of things. Being a leader that is present, and I'm not talking about physical presence, right? So, for example, with my team, I put a lot of effort into making sure that they can reach me, right? That even though if I'm just saying working from home, or they cannot see me in the office, if they call me, if they email me and things like that, I'm present. I am there to help them, to support them, right? Because as a leadership, we don't want to. Our team should not feel that they are left alone in the dark, right? So I think being present without being physical present, and it might sound contradicting, but it is possible. Right. So, and some of it also come down to communication. So you communicate with your team and say, what is the best time to reach me? And what is not the best time to reach me? And I think that is also a very important thing to focus on as a leader.
So presence and availability.
Yeah, and I think it's probably more availability than present itself, right? So because then the present is more like when they contact you, you are actually there to listen and to guide them. That's needed, right? That's the present that you show. So I think, yeah, availability, and definitely now with where the work environment has changed, right? People working from home or in different countries and so forth, right? But your team members still need to feel that they can reach you as a leader.
Yeah, and this is so vital because I've met a lot of leaders who have so much to do. They have they're traveling, they're busy, they're going from a meeting to meeting. But for their people, for their employees who try to call them or reach them, a lot of people get frustrated because they cannot reach their boss, or they feel their boss is not available or not present. And so it doesn't really matter how much you have as a leader. If you're not available, if you're not present for your people, they're not going to understand that.
No.
They're not going to appreciate that.
Exactly. And I think also another thing maybe is also that as a leader, you don't always need to tell. I think I mentioned it early on that you don't need to come up with the answers. You should have a more coaching approach, right? Ask the right questions, encourage your team members to come up with the solutions, right? Because in many cases, people know what they should do, right? You just need to ask the right questions. What we tend to do immediately is that, okay, I have a team member that have asked me about this, then I need to come up with an answer. No, maybe stop, reflect, ask them, what do you think could be a good approach? Why do you think this could be a good approach, right? What are some of the challenges with doing this? Are there other options that we can pursue, as things like that, right? It's much more engaging, and it's also helping you as a leader to grow your employees.
I think what people want is just like you said before, it's psychological safety. And if I feel safe in my environment, and if you as a leader help me in that process, and if you have a coaching mindset, I will appreciate you more as a leader. I will look up to you more as a leader. And I think we will also create a more healthy work environment. But if I have to feel that I have to go to my boss for every single thing, I don't have the courage to make a decision by myself and so forth, I think the leader has failed to actually create that psychological safety you talked about earlier.
Yes, definitely. So it's definitely an area that we as a leader should pay attention to.
Great, man. One last question before I let you go. If you had to give people only one advice, all the books you've read, your wonderful experience, what you've achieved so far, you could only give people one advice to live a better life, what would it be?
Don't take things personally.
Don't take things personally.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I think that's a very important lesson.
Is it hard not to take things personally?
It is. You have done an analysis and then people don't agree with the analysis. You have put so much effort into it. Of course, you will take it personally, right? So don't take it personally. Life is too short for that, right? So move on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate our time together. Thank you for what we have talked about today, all your advice, your guidance. Such an inspiration, your leadership style, your communication style, and I really appreciate for you coming here today and sharing with us your important insights on leadership and communication.
Thanks a lot. Nice to be here. So thanks a lot for inviting me.